but I'm sure those will be explored further on.
I call Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party will not be supporting this bill today, as we're being asked to sign up to an erosion of a core human right for the nebulous gain of improving public service delivery. We do certainly acknowledge that there are instances where information sharing could produce good results. However, this legislation does not put adequate checks and balances or provide a clarity of purpose, and we do not believe the Select Committee process is enough of a public consultation to justify the erosion or redefinition of one of our core rights. Green Party policy requires us to scrutinise closely any information sharing between different state databases and oppose those that are unwarranted. We are also required to review controls on the exchange of information between government agencies to ensure consistency with the aims of the Privacy Act. We do not believe this bill is warranted or that the controls outlined are adequate to protect against breaches, and neither do we believe they are consistent with the intent of the Privacy Act. So just to remind the House of some of our understandings, our common understandings of what is privacy and why it's important to us and why it's a human right, I'd just like to draw your attention to information on the Privacy Commission's website. That privacy is basically about people's need to be able to protect information about themselves. And secondly, that acknowledging that people need the opportunity to withdraw physically or mentally from society. And privacy, as defined by this common understanding, is important to ensure that we all feel secure. For instance, we become tense when we're constantly under scrutiny. We also often define our relationships with other people by the information we choose to share with them. So if we're unable to control who knows information about us, we will feel insecure, at least in part because the boundaries of our relationships become uncertain. Human beings need security to be able to function normally in their social environment. So privacy, which supports or creates feelings of security, is an important human right. If we feel secure, we're more likely to play a full part in society. The Privacy Commission, of course, acknowledged that although privacy is important, it's not absolute. All privacy law already makes allowances for other social interests, such as preventing crime, ensuring safety, and ensuring courts get information to make their decisions. Please note that none of those points reference revenue collection or the improvement of public services. They've never been considered as priorities over the basic right to privacy. The aim of the bill before the House today is to amend the Privacy Act and the Tax Administration Act to facilitate information sharing between agencies. The key changes, as stated in the bill, are to allow the use and disclosure of personal information where there is a serious threat to public health or safety or the life or health of an individual, and removing the necessity for that threat to be imminent, as is currently required. It also allows information sharing agreements to be implemented by Order in Council to clarify or modify the application of the privacy principles. And it also allows these agreements to be between and within government agencies as well as private sector organisations, which includes NGOs. We have several concerns around this in detail. Removing imminent from the legislation in relation to threat and making it just a serious threat to public health or public safety or the life or health of the individual concerned or another individual would effectively enable government agencies to profile people and share information on the basis of profiles. I do not believe that this is consistent with the intent of the original Act or our shared understanding of privacy rights. It also holds a potential to reinforce racist stereotypes, and I think that is something that as a country we need to be very careful of. The creation of information sharing agreements by regulation is problematic, as people's privacy rights could be undermined, and agreements can provide exemptions to privacy principles. And the checks and balances that are provided by the Privacy Commissioner's advice are not binding on the Cabinet. This for us is not good enough. It gives Cabinet new and significant powers to override privacy rights. Further, I'd like to draw attention to, I come from a community organisation background, and I really would be sad to see us lose the pressure for agencies to engage people in the choice about whether their information is shared. Currently, Strengthening Families is an example of information sharing between agencies, and it gives us an insight into how some of the tensions might work in this area. And typically the process goes two ways. One way where agencies get together excluding the family and decide what the family need to do. Or secondly, when the family is central to the process, they choose that their information is shared and they are involved all the way along. This latter option is generally acknowledged as the better practice, which is more likely to lead to long-term positive outcomes. However, of course, there is real pressure on agencies to get outcomes and tick boxes. And this pressure often leads to the first approach being taken. We believe that this piece of legislation will provide more justification for that first approach and will provide many more pathways for excluding people from decisions about the sharing of their personal information. In the Social Sector Forum briefing to the incoming Minister, they allude to this bill by noting, for example, planned amendments to the Privacy Act, if pursued, would enable government agencies to enter into information sharing agreements with other government and non-government agencies. So clearly stating that this bill will cover business, community, iwi organisations, as with Strengthening Families. And to give more of a sense of the government agencies' impressions of how they might use this Act, I again quote the Social Sector Forum BIM, saying, better information sharing would reduce duplication and help them better provide services to families with multiple issues. Information sharing is also the starting point for developing an investment approach, and it supports better assessment, monitoring and evaluation of the impact of particular programs and services. However, of course, it's important to remain mindful of privacy and safety considerations. It's the last little addition to make that okay. As I've mentioned already, I come from the community and voluntary whenua sector, previously known as the third sector. It's been known as the third sector because alongside government and business, the community sector has a distinct culture and values and helps keep this country running. The third sector is not an arm of the state and should not be treated as such. I believe it will be to the detriment of the country as a whole if this independence is undermined any further than it already has been. To give government the potential to pressure community organisations to share information without individual consent and against the code of practice of those organisations is a threat to the autonomy of the sector. I say this from having managed several health and welfare organisations. I know from experience how important confidentiality of information is to young people accessing health services and for women escaping domestic violence. The government may think that information sharing will improve service delivery, but there may be very significant unintended consequences if we put more pressure on community organisations to share information, or indeed even extend the sharing of information between government agencies without very strong forethought. I heard today about a pregnant woman on the DPB who's escaping a violent relationship. And she told her community-based advocate that she's considering hiding her pregnancy because she's scared that if Housing New Zealand or the health system find out, they will tell wins. And she'll experience incentives to find work more quickly than she could cope with. A nuanced message of responsible information sharing will not be the message received by our most vulnerable people. The drive to hide information...
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. Her time has expired.
Mr Chairman.
I call Dr Cam Calder.
Mr Chairman, it's a great pleasure to